we don't waver in our commitment to cover everyone. And because when you commit to covering everyone, as we have in Massachusetts, this is why Massachusetts is such a great laboratory, then the costs of that commitment become very, very political. And they attract tremendous attention, and all sorts of really dumb ideas get floated for things that might be done to try to make things affordable. But the threat of those dumb ideas leads providers to go, wait a minute, don't do that. Let us move into organizations that might actually do something better. Because if providers don't do the redesign of care, well, then what can happen? Well, the people paying for care can just sort of cut prices, not allow inflation to be taken into account. They can use a bunch of tools which are what's needed to get through the year, but they have lots of unintended consequences that we don't want, that are certainly less attractive than providers getting organized. So I think that if we don't have a commitment to cover everyone, it's very tough to imagine the redesign of care happening as anything other than like a boutique type effort, as opposed to like an organizational strategy. My real job is to sustain the fantasies of patients about what kind of doctor they have. So like one of the things that I have, like I carry on my notebook, I've got a list of my patients who are like kind of fragile, in and out of the hospital, and I have the same kind of thing list on my computer at home. On the weekends, I put the Red Sox on mute, not so much the Red Sox these days, but and I multitask and I just call them up. This is so that when I drive around, I'll just make a call. And like I call and I go, "This is Dr. Lee, I just called to see how you're doing." And they love it. And now the best thing is when I just
unusual.
No, but our most beloved doctors do this for their most beloved patients, but we should do it for all of our patients who need it, right? I mean, we shouldn't be doing it for the rich people, the white people. We should do it for the people who need it. We all know that, but I mean, that's why like I make myself go down the list in order, because I've got all my people who've been in the hospital recently, and so I do that, and and it's to sustain their fantasies, that they have a physician who remembers who they are, who cares about them, who's worried about them, and who's going to respond to information. But as I said, I'm delighted when I get an answering machine, because I just say, "Oh, it's Dr. Lee, just call to see how you're doing," and you call me back if there's anything I can do for you. And but now my patients love me, and they drive from long distances, and they'll pay whatever it takes to come see me. Now I go through that not to give you the story about like how wonderful I am, but I go through that because the question that we've been posing in partners is, what's the organizational equivalent of that? Because people know that they're not being taken care of by just one person anymore. It's too complicated. So what are their fantasies about the organization of providers who's taking care of them? They have fantasy, and again, I'm talking fantasies like in the psychiatric sense. What are their hopes and expectations? That if we sustain them, they will love us, and they will keep coming to us, even if it ends up costing them a little bit more. They have fantasies that we're talking to each other. That if they tell one of us that they're allergic to some drug, that another of us won't give it to them. That they have fantasies that we care if they're in pain, and even if it's Friday night of a 3-day weekend, that we'll be responsive. They have fantasies that if they really need to get in seen faster than 2 or 3 months, someone will figure that out and get them in. The truth is, their expectations of us are probably lower than they should be. But if we can understand what their fantasies are. Those are like tier 2 outcomes in Porter's framework. And we can create systems that sustain those fantasies. That's a good business strategy. There are going to be conflicts between short-term safety and long-term outcomes. Between readmission rates and 90-day and maximizing your number of days at home. The example I love the most is like for children with congenital aortic stenosis, narrowing of their aortic valves. You put a catheter in with a balloon, you blow up the balloon, and it dilates the valve. Any competent person can get the catheter, in place. The complication rate is dictated by how big the balloon is. The bigger the balloon, the more you open up the valve, but the higher the risk of valve rupture, where you tear the ring of the valve and they get acute leakage and they have to rush the child to the operating room. But the smaller the balloon, the less you open things up. So if you look at the bell-shaped curve of complication rates for balloon valvuloplasty, you want the person in the middle. You don't want the person with the lowest complication rate, because they are someone who's probably valuing their own complication statistics more than the outcome of the child, the long-term outcome. And those children are going to need another procedure in a couple years. You certainly don't want the one who's got the highest complication rate. So what you want to do is look at what the crowd is doing, look at variation, and there is no best, but being how far you are from the middle, that's an important thing to know. So that's why a lot of what we're trying to do is measure. There's some things where we're trying to standardize things where everyone should do this. There are some things where there is no right or wrong. We're trying to show people the bell-shaped curve and understand where they're an outlier. So there's standardization, variation, reduction as two major themes of what we're doing. And then there's a third avenue of real radical care redesign, which is not the same as variation reduction. These are the kind of streams of thought going on. But they're definitely, that's why we show multiple outcomes. We tell people, don't waste your time trying to figure out if you're the best or who's the best. That's not the question. The question is, where might you learn from someone else? There's good, bad, and ugly to this ACO stuff. The good is we actually are really trying to do this stuff, and I know that it's going to make us proud in the long run. Now the bad part is that these contracts are 50-50 risk sharing, pretty much, and so that if you're my patient and I think about it, I got to get an MRI, Medicare will pay for the other half of the MRI, Blue Cross will for a commercial patient, or Harvard Pilgrim or Tufts. And so as long as it actually is more important that I hold the business within our system than that I don't do the MRI or find another way of doing it. I mean, I'm not going to withhold the MRI regardless, but as long as we're doing our system, we're paying wholesale, we're not paying retail. And if our marginal costs for doing that MRI are less than 50%, well, hey, we're actually coming out ahead. If our marginal costs are 75%, it's really not that. What's the big deal? So we're losing a little bit of money, but I'm not going to lose sleep over what's going on with you. So the bad part is that everyone is figured out that reducing leakage is actually a more important short and medium-term strategy than actually being more efficient. And so you see all sorts of ACOs adding capacity, hiring their own oncologists, acquiring their own, skilled nursing facilities so they can hold things within their system. And the thing about healthcare is if capacity exists, it's going to get used and it's going to raise the cost of care. So in effect, what you can see is there's going to be some bubbles that are going to pop because people are going to add capacity and there's just not going to be the business there. I mean, what we're expecting is that we're going to be more efficient, and we're taking money from our hospitals and so on, and investing them in systems which will lead to fewer patients going to our hospitals. So how does that work from a business perspective? Well, we'd better improve our market share, or we're going to have to shut down things. We'd rather not shut down things because we're trying to pursue our various missions, teaching and research and so on. But so ideally we'll take market share from someone else and to fill the beds that we open up. But we and everyone else are adding capacity in some ways. So the ugly part is that, to really save costs, capacity is going to have to come out of the marketplace. Places are going to have to close, and that will follow. It'll follow after like some of these bubbles pop. It should follow regardless. We got hospitals in every little town, because it's from an era where medicine was different, where there wasn't anything you could do but put people in a bed, and their length of stay would be 30 days, and you needed to be close by. But we're in an era now where it actually is important to concentrate patients, so you can have enough volume that you can really have teams and so on. So there's going to be a lot of turmoil. Organizations that are characterized, that have more social capitals, that are characterized by trust, for example, are going to be more efficient. You don't need to be spending every night and every morning in meetings, as I currently do. And when I do that, I'm meeting with other people, and we're all being paid off the backs of the clinical system to have those meetings. And then they can actually deliver care that sustains the fantasies of patients, and they can do it more efficiently. So I think those organizations will win in the long run. So when I saw patients yesterday morning, I'm perfect. I'm 100%. At the end of each visit, I printed out a summary for the patient of all the current medicines, the changes we made in their medications during this visit, and then there's a box where I typed out these, we're going to get you a referral to for a colonoscopy. I'm going to get these test results, and I'm going to, be in touch with you. That, sometimes it's just one or two things. Sometimes it was 5 or 6 things, and I gave it to them. And by a minute, I had to type it before they left the room. And in the old days, I used to just go, so we're going to do this, 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 and the patient go, and you knew that they weren't retaining it. And they would go home, and they go, what was I supposed to do? But now we're giving them these visit report summaries. It's adding like 2 or 3 minutes to the workflow. And physicians are complaining like crazy. But we all know this is the right thing to do. And so I think that these meaningful use things, I think they're raising the minimum bar for playing the game, for being in the game. Now, there are organizations, I hope that partners will be, playing in a different league. I hope that we'll be, in basketball terminology, playing above the rim. Partners is ripping out all of its IT system, and we're implementing Epic. And Epic is, some of you may work in the space, some, so you know the company Epic. Epic's name, it's a record based around the patient as opposed to generating services. So Epic refers to a patient's epic journey through life. So when I heard this 4-word, tagline for Epic, I fell in love, which is one patient, one record. And so the idea of, like right now, if I want to track, like our stroke team wants to make sure patients with a transient ischemic attack if they're not admitted, they get seen by someone who knows what they're doing, and they get their TIA workup within a day. But if the ED visit happens at Newton Wellesley and the stroke workup happens at Mass General, it's a nightmare for us to actually, merge the data to try to measure that kind of thing. With Epic, it'll be what happens to patient Ethel Jones, and we'll be able to, track how we're doing for patients much more directly, because the system's built for that. But it's an investment of hundreds of millions of dollars for partners over the next decade.